Florida is, well, would like to think of itself, I think, as leading the charge and restricting the teaching of materials in schools that make MAGA Governor Ron DeSantis feel uncomfortable. That crusade is being championed all across the country and other states as well. As we showed you, one school board in Colorado has a big problem with author and journalist Ta-Nehisi Coates reading a book from one of his quotes from one of his books at a meeting stripped of context as a sort of condemnation of critical examinations of race in America. So I would like to bring in the author himself, Ta-Nehisi Coates, winner of the National Book Award, MacArthur Fellowship, author of several best-selling books, including the one in question, Between the World and Me. Good to have you here.
Thank you, and thank you for that introduction, guys. Well, that was really kind.
It was all true. What do you think, what goes through your head when you see like this Star Chamber type interrogation of your text and a teacher before a school board having to defend a single quote from it?
I thank God that the guy asking the question isn't a teacher. Look, you can pull a sentence out of any text and say, you know, what do you think of this? You know, obviously, you know, one of the big arguments of Between the World and Me is that race is a social fiction. So when we say white people will cease to exist, the idea is the category will too. And racially, the hope would be that black people would too. You know what I mean? Which is, you know, the case that the story makes. It does not mean that white people will be physically eradicated from the face of the earth. But, you know, if somebody wants to do that, they can do it.
Well, and it also, I mean, the other thing that it strikes me with that quote and about the way that you write about race, both in Between the World and Me and in your novel, there's a phrase you use of people that think they're white or believe that they're white, that it is a belief. It is a belief system. It is a social construct and is a way of people constructing a social reality together that is imbued with history and material consequences. But fundamentally, it isn't actually a biological reality.
Yeah, and that's the argument that's being made. And actually, I think the elements of that belief system can be seen in this slate of laws. Take, for example, this notion that students should not be exposed to anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, discomfort, or any sense of, this is my favorite, personal responsibility for anything that's ever happened in history. Anybody that's ever, you know, studied history in any sort of serious way knows that you feel a range of emotions. And 70% of the time, those emotions are not positive, you know, emotions that make you feel good about the world. The goal of education isn't, you know, to tell you that, you know, the world is sunshine and rainbows. The goal is enlightenment. The goal is some deeper understanding of humanity, and that's what, you know, you hopefully are trying to get across to students.
This is what's so perverse, right? Because it is this entire backlash was shepherded in under the cover of critical thinking, and the left is sort of trying to indoctrinate people. Right. And I want to just play you this little clip from Jonathan Cox, who's this sociologist I spoke to, who I was really just impressed with, who he was talking about what he's trying to do in the classroom, right? Like with these two classes on race that he had to cancel because of this law. Take a listen.
I try to bring in lots of different perspectives and encourage students to do so. So, I mean, like, for example, we talk about something like cultural appropriation. I might present one article, you know, that talks about it and saying, like, this is what it is, here's why it's really negative, and another article that presents a completely different view. And then we'll talk about it in class so that students, you know, I don't want them to just swallow stuff, and actually tell them all the time, like don't take what I'm saying just to be the pure 100% truth, right? Like, go out and do some research on your own. I want you to be critical thinkers. So I really try to actively fight against that caricature that you kind of expressed about what people think of in my classrooms. And I also don't go in leading with my opinions. I very rarely, almost never share my own opinion, right? I'm much more interested in the thoughts and ideas that students are bringing with them.
I mean, that's a guy who's didn't teach.
Right.
2 courses at the largest state school in Florida because of the DeSantis law.
Right. You know, the fascinating part of me is, was it only 2 years ago that there was this notion that kids on campus were too soft and, you know what I mean, needed to be coddled and you know, this, that, and that. And now we have literal laws saying that. We have actual laws, not, you know, beliefs, not ideas, but actual on the books laws saying that, you know, students, you know, in the most recent case, in an AP class of all places, you know, are somehow too sensitive to be exposed to ideas that, you know, give them a SAD. You know, it is, you know, utterly ridiculous. And it's so clearly not education. The point of it is not education. I'm a teacher, too. I teach down at Howard University. I expose my kids to all sorts of things from all sorts of perspectives that I do not hold myself. There is no way in the world I could be a black writer and say, I will never read anybody that's racist. I'll never read anybody that's sexist. You couldn't live. You couldn't practice your craft if you were like that, you know?
I mean, the irony is, like, you and I there are people, and I'm not going to name them, who, like, you and I have talked about, like, writers we like or don't like, writers whose politics we don't like, but you're like, yo, that guy can write.
But the craft.
That's a good argument.
And you have to do that. Like, you have to, and even if you completely disagree with a person, how will you know what you disagree with if you don't read them? If you don't read them seriously, how will you know?
The thing, and then the one layer deeper than that I find, and I don't know if people have looked at this, but I spent some time on this, like this stuff, the Florida law. It's not just that, there's the education aspect to it, but there's also a degree to which it is essentially stipulating a civic creed officially for the state of Florida that is an ideology. And so here's like an example. This is a thing that you can't teach in Florida. Under Florida law now, although the law is currently enjoined. Such virtues as merit, excellence, hard work, fairness, neutrality, objectivity, and racial colorblindness are racist or sexist, or were created by members of a particular race, color, sex, or national origin to oppress members of another race, color, sex, or national origin. Now, you may or may not agree with that as a thesis.
Right.
But that is now the official state creed of Florida, that you can't say that racial colorblindness was invented as a means of furthering racial oppression.
I don't understand that at all. I mean, honestly, when I read that, it sounds like somebody else who was an activist wrote that and fed it to the legislatures. It's so weirdly specific. You almost can detect the hand of somebody else there working. No need to name names, but it's absurd. It's absurd. And it's, just another highlight for why people like that, shouldn't be involved in the kind of decisions that are made in a classroom.
To step back for a second, where do you wrote this, I remember writing this really good piece for The Atlantic about Trump, where you call him the first white president, sort of somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but making the point about, again, how whiteness is constructed, that only in relation to the backlash against
that was the point.
The first black president, could there be a white president in the way that we understand whiteness, right? It's in contrast. We had this moment in 2020 amidst the pandemic and George Floyd's death and the aftermath. And these historic, by all metrics, I mean, just people counting in the streets, like maybe the largest civil rights protest we've ever had in this country. This incredibly strong backlash against it playing out in places like this. And now here we sit in 2023, just a few weeks after the death of Tyre Nichols at the hands of Memphis police. And where do you see things in this kind of push and pull?
Believe it or not, I'm kind of excited. And here's why. The history of this country in terms of these backlashes is that they generally come and are generally the most ferocious when the forces that would like to maintain the status quo are most afraid. You can't understand redemption without understanding Reconstruction, and without understanding Reconstruction as an actual threat. You can't understand the backlash that came after the Civil Rights Movement without understanding how much certain people perceive the Civil Rights Movement as an existential threat. And I think it's the same thing here. You gotta, take a second and, step back. If you look at the culture and you look at who's present and you look at who has the authority, I hate to, come close to home, but you look at, say, a movie like Wakanda Forever that is on the verge of making $1 billion. This matters because people look around and they see who is holding place. It was the same thing for Barack Obama. The idea that the equivalent of American royalty was held by somebody who only generations ago, their very conception would have been illegal. This disrupts the conception of what America is, and it frightens people. And so you get backlash. You know what I mean? And so I actually take it as a sign of strength, for where the movement is right now. But we always knew this was going to happen. I mean, the expectation that, the war would just be won and that would be it, it just, was always fantasy.
Yeah, and sometimes those backlashes can be dangerous, too.
They definitely can, and I don't want to diminish that.
Right, yeah.
I'm not diminishing that at all.
And I think, you're seeing it, you're seeing it in schools, you're seeing it in certain ways in which, like, criminal justice laws, backlash against bail reform, all these different places where progress is made, you can see the backlash politics being marshaled.
And I just think that's because the idea is sticking. Like, how does the 1619 Project end up in an executive order? Like, think about that. Like, what piece of journalism can you remember ending up in an executive order?
I mean, no piece of journalism I've ever produced has any...
Me either, brother.
Has any president ever cared that much about one way or the other?
Me either. And so what that means is people are afraid.
Right.
That means something is sticking in the minds. They're actually using the levers of the state. It doesn't mean it's not dangerous. I want to be really clear about that. But it's also a statement of how threatened they feel and, the effect that some of this work has had.
It's interesting you say that because I do think, I'm constantly trying to keep these two tracks in my head of the material and the ideological.
Yeah.
So it's like there is so much force and momentum behind these ideas. They're not new ideas. They're old ideas about racial equality, about deconstructing whiteness, about taking apart. And then I look at the material and it's what's the racial wealth gap?
That's a great point.
What's happening? Have we closed the life expectancy gap between black and white people? We have not. Is it staying the same? It is. And I'm always wrestling in my head those two things, because it does feel like the ideas have an ascendancy and they do have a force and they are scared because they are.
Right.
And then you look at the material aspect and it's like, it feels like a less encouraging story.
I think, though, those on the other side understand that one undergirds the other. That if ideas of white supremacy become less ingrained in the body politic, then when folks look around at the jail system, maybe they actually really do start asking questions. When folks look around at who's poor and who's not, maybe they really do start asking questions in a way that they didn't before. I think of it like the foundation of a building. You can chip away, and you can see progress, in the chipping away, but the building might still be there. You know what I mean? And so it is that the edifice of white supremacy still is there, even as the foundation, is being chipped away.
Do you think, there's some evidence to suggest that the peak of racial polarization in American politics happens under Barack Obama in recent times, right? Just in terms of sorting, that it starts to depolarize along lines of race as you get further away from Barack Obama. People have made this argument, whether it's true or not. I sort of think the data is a little unclear. Mm-hmm. But do you think the post-Trump era that those lines remain as hard as ever?
I don't know. It's a difficult question for me to understand because I have difficulty with that analysis. I think white people were certainly more frightened under Barack Obama, or a certain type of, or a critical mass, or a certain kind of white person was certainly much more frightened and much more politically active. And I think that's definitely true. But the vocabulary of racial polarization conjures the idea that somehow things were more separated. And I think from a black perspective, we would find that hard to grok under Barack Obama. I don't think
Right, yes.
If you look at I certainly did not feel any more distance. I mean, I think we always felt distance. Did we feel more distance under Barack Obama from a black perspective? I don't know that we did.
No. You can make an argument there was more proximity.
I agree. And I think that was part of the problem. I think that right there was exactly part of the problem.
That was the source of the...
Yeah, I think to the extent I wish we could come up with another term besides polarization. But let's just say I prefer the term fear. So let's just say for a certain sector of white America being afraid, I think that proximity was a problem. And this goes back to what we were talking about before. I actually think the symbolism of it was a problem, which is not the material. You're correct about that. You know what I mean? But I think the symbolism of it still threatens people because they correctly identify that it's the symbolism that undergirds all of it. There's a reason why, folks came up with ideologies to justify slavery.
I was thinking about the symbolism today with Ilhan Omar. I mean, when you talk about soft power, which is just a nice sort of polarization, it's kind of not my favorite term. But, what people think about America, and it's so wild to me, the cultural supernova, nuclear fusion that is America, where you go in around the world and you hear American pop songs and you see American movie stars and American shows, much of which, a disproportionate amount of which is generated by black people, right? So African Americans generate a crazy pie chart of what is global pop culture. Right. But to have Ilhan Omar as this symbol of here's a woman who came to the U.S. as a refugee fleeing war, black Muslim woman, she wears a hijab, who's a member of the U.S. Congress, and what that means symbolically, and then to sanction her and what that means symbolically.
Yeah, I don't think that's a mistake.
Right.
We were talking earlier about, performance. One thing that I think about, you told me this years ago, and I don't know if you remember this, but you said, what you often say to people who say voting doesn't matter, is that if you look at wealthy people, they have some of the highest voting rates.
They all vote.
So if it doesn't matter, why are all these wealthy people voting?
Go look at the voting, go around Palm Springs and see what voting, they're voting.
And I feel the same way about this conversation about symbolism, right? Why do the people with power care about it so much? If it has no power, if it's ultimately irrelevant, why are they so focused on it? You know what I mean? Are they making some sort of tactical error? Are they, foolish and, not paying attention to the right thing? Or do they understand that this is the thing that actually undergirds much of the material power that they enjoy in the first place?
What are you working on these days?
Why would you do that to me?
You don't have to tell me.
I'm working on Superman.
You're working on Superman.
I'm working on Superman. That's why nobody sees me. It's called Superman. So, I mean, you can imagine how big of a job that is.
Yeah, I mean, that's the ultimate symbol, right?
Yeah. I'm working on Superman. I'm trying not to say anything else, but yes.
Where do you see, I guess, this question of sort of this back and forth, like the force of these ideas? Like, I've been really stuck. I felt a little, I mean, after Tyre Nichols' death, I keep running through this thing.
You watched the whole video, didn't you? You had to for your job, right?
Yeah, we did, although we told people on the staff that you don't have to.
Yeah. I haven't watched it.
Yeah. It's just incredibly upsetting. But the thing that I keep coming back to, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts on, is like, I feel this feeling of like, okay, if you make me the king of Memphis for a day, or the head of the police department, or I have a magic wand, like, you know, solve it. And it's like, there are certain problems in American life where I feel like I got a beat on that. Mm-hmm. And then that one, I feel like there were times where I did. Mm-hmm. But now if you said, okay, here's the magic wand, go fix it.
You know what I think the tough thing is? It is, if crime rates go up, the answer is we need more cops and we need to put people in jail. If crime rates go down, that's because we have a ton of cops and we have a lot of people in jail. You know, the answer is...
It's a one-way racket.
It's always the stick. It's always the stick. And it's really, really... I mean, this is like, you know, you talk about things that make you pessimistic. When I look at the entire edifice of criminal justice in this country, I mean, we really did something. We really, really did something that's going to be really, really hard to unwind.
Although, to go back to your point before, there really has been some progress, and I want to
tell me something good. I'd love to hear.
I mean, there has been reduction in incarceration rates. There's been bail reform that has worked in a lot of places.
That's true.
But it is under assault now.
Yeah.
Ta-Nehisi Coates, what a great pleasure to have you here.
Hey, man, thank you for having me. And thank you again for that introduction.
Of course. We'll be right back.